On the day I was tortured to death in the cold storage by a gang of thugs, he was busy photographing an $8 million custom-made jewelry set for a famous actress. On screen, she covered her face, choking back tears. Although Nestor's sister bullied me back then, almost leading to my assault, I'm willing to forgive her if she apologizes to me. Facing the overwhelming online harassment from her fans, Nestor sent me a text message. When you're ready to kneel and publicly apologize to Coral, I'll let you out of the cold storage. But he never got my reply. Instead, he received a call from the police, asking him to come identify a body. He finally learned that I had never bullied his so-called perfect angel, it was all her scheme. Be gentle, will you? She's barely breathing now. What are we supposed to do if she dies? I lay on the cold floor of the storage room, too weak to open my eyes. The pain, unbearable pain. My entire body ached, not a single part spared. The thugs splashed me with a bucket of icy water. Seeing no response from me, they started to panic. After all, she's the daughter of that once prominent family. If something happens, what's there to fear? That family is long gone. And besides, these are Mr. Nestor's orders. Yes, my family has long since been destroyed. Through the haze, I heard their words and curled my lips in a bitter smile. If only I had listened to my grandfather and not insisted on bringing Nestor into our family, I wouldn't have ended up like this. If Grandpa's spirit is watching, he must think I'm a disappointment. With a heavy thud, the iron door shut, plunging the room into darkness. The air grew colder, numbing the pain from my wounds. Oddly, as I lay there in the growing numbness, I felt a hint of warmth, a sensation I hadn't felt in a long time. At least now, there's no more pain. That was my last thought as my soul drifted away. When noise flooded into my ears again, I could hardly believe it. I looked up to see that man, handsome like a deity. He was seated elegantly in the VIP section, wearing a finely tailored suit, his onyx-like eyes fixed straight ahead. Nestor, had he noticed me? My heart skipped a beat, but I quickly realized the truth. Ever since Coral, his so-called perfect angel, had entered his life 7 years ago, he hadn't looked at me with such gentle, attentive eyes. Congratulations to Mr. Nestor. The final bid is $8 million for this jewelry set. Staff will deliver it to your estate soon, the host announced. Nestor gave a faint smile. No need to trouble yourselves. Send it directly to Coral. Congratulations on her award. The media went wild. The live broadcast screen shifted to show Coral, dressed in an elegant sapphire blue gown, holding her award like a noble swan. Her pale fingers covered her lips as she choked up with tears, smiling through them. Though Doris bullied me back then and nearly caused me irreparable harm, I don't hold it against her. It's been a long, difficult road for me to reach this point, and I'm most grateful to Mr. Nestor. Her emotional statement stirred up the room even more. I watched Nestor's face closely, expecting a trace of a smile. But he just stared at Coral's face on the screen, lost in thought. One daring reporter raised a microphone. Mr. Nestor, Doris, who allegedly bullied the best actress, is also your sister. Do you have any comment? Hearing my name, Nestor's gaze darkened briefly. Nothing to say. He rose, coolly. I stopped recognizing Doris as my sister long ago. When the reporter tried to press further, Nestor politely declined and made his way to the balcony alone. He lit a cigarette and pulled out his phone, opening our last conversation. The last message was from 2 days ago, the message I had managed to send him just before the thugs took me. Brother, please help me. At that moment, I had still clung to a glimmer of hope for Nestor. With his power, it should have been easy for him to rescue me from a few petty criminals. As the thugs restrained me in the cold storage, I thrashed, screaming, "Do you know who I am? I'm Nestor's sister. If you lay a hand on me, my brother will flay you alive." One of them slapped my face with a mocking laugh. Wow, she's a feisty one, huh? You really think Mr. Nestor cares about you? He's got Coral now. Coral is the real lady of high society. To tell you the truth, if it weren't for Mr. Nestor's orders, we wouldn't have bothered with you. This is just karma, serving you a taste of your own medicine. Stunned, I stared, blinking until one of them shoved his phone in my face. I saw that familiar avatar and read his message. Nestor, make sure it's done cleanly. I don't want to see her ever again. The thugs roared with laughter. It felt like a punch to the gut. My head buzzed as hot tears streamed down my cheeks. Then, in shock, I let my arms fall limply, ceasing all resistance. No matter how they tortured me, I didn't make a sound. Nestor, when it comes to ruthlessness, I can't compete with you. You've won. I watched dispassionately as my soul hovered nearby, observing Nestor, lost in his own thoughts. After a while, he frowned, typing out a message. Doris, have you realized your mistake? Of course, there was no reply. I was already dead. How could I respond to him instantly, like I used to? Nestor waited for a long time, staring at the empty message box, seeing no reply or even the typing indicator. His expression darkened. Fine, still being stubborn, are you? Whenever you're ready to kneel publicly and apologize to Coral, that's when I'll let you out. Let me out? Let a corpse out, maybe? I smiled bitterly and looked down at my transparent chest. Good. Without a heart, there's no more pain. The night grew darker. Nestor drove to the airport to pick up Coral. She was still wearing the dress from the award ceremony, the pink diamond necklace worth $8 million shining around her neck, adding an air of refined elegance. Has my sister replied to your message? Coral asked cautiously, watching Nestor's expression. No, Nestor said, steering calmly, his face indifferent. Why does it matter? Those people will handle her well. She'll learn her lesson. Where he couldn't see, Coral's fingers clenched tightly. She knew it, despite his harsh words, Nestor could never truly let Doris die. If she hadn't staged that setup, making him believe Doris had bullied her, he'd have kept on indulging Doris. Nestor, noticing Coral's prolonged silence, rubbed his temples wearily. Coral, don't worry. I've already told Doris to publicly kneel and apologize to you. She has nothing left. From now on, I'll keep her in line and make sure she doesn't hurt you again. All right? Coral's sharp nails dug into her palm. After a moment, she forced a gentle smile. All right, thank you, brother. I let out a scornful laugh. Coral is my half-sister. When I was 17, my father's mistress brought her into our home. My mother, already struggling with depression, couldn't bear it and soon passed away. That day, I lost both my beloved mother and the father I once respected. I hated Coral and her mother, so I was always cold and hostile to them. Coral tried to get close to me, offering me butter cookies she'd baked or pressing my dresses for me. But I never appreciated it. I'd stomp on her cookies in front of her and cut her pressed dresses to shreds, throwing them in the trash. After that, Coral didn't dare approach me again. I enjoyed the peace. Until one day, I accidentally saw Coral crying in Nestor's arms, looking as pitiful as a flower in the rain. Brother, my sister doesn't like me. She's always targeting me. I'm afraid I'll end up dead in this house someday. Nestor patted her back gently, comforting her in the same soft voice he once used with me. Don't worry, Coral. I'll protect you. I froze, feeling my heart squeeze painfully. Nestor knew what kind of person I was. I was the one who would help an elderly beggar or guide a lost child. I was the one who insisted on taking him in, even when he was a scruffy, silent orphan. Yet he so easily believed the lie that I'd harm Coral. Since Coral was young, she always had the talent to be an actress. Her acting was impressive. One moment, she would be in the classroom, showing a shy, innocent smile to her classmates. The next, she would slash her own face with a knife without hesitation. Guess who they'll believe, me or you? She shoved the utility knife into my hand and ran out of the bathroom with her face covered in blood, crying, and her screams drew everyone's attention. That time, I was locked in a dark room by my furious father for 3 whole days, without food. If it hadn't been for my grandfather sternly ordering him to let me out, I might have truly starved to death in there. I'd been afraid of the dark since I was little, and my mind was already on the verge of collapse. When the door finally opened, Coral was standing with my father, stepmother, and Nestor. When she saw my disheveled appearance, she shrank back as if in fear, and Nestor immediately shielded her. Doris, what are you trying to do? Coral leaned into his embrace, casting me a secret, smug smile. She looked as noble as the moon in the sky, while I was like a mad dog, too lowly even to touch the crescent in his heart. Even those I was once closest to guarded themselves against me, wary that I might bite the moon of their heart. I'll admit it, I was insanely jealous and furious. So, in front of them all, I shoved Coral down the stairs. That day, Coral broke her leg and had to stay in bed for 3 months. Outside her hospital room, my father slapped me twice across the face. Nestor's eyes grew dark as he looked at the frail Coral lying in bed. "Doris, go apologize to Coral." With my cheeks swollen and red, I stubbornly glared at him. "Why should I? I did nothing wrong. She was the one who falsely accused me of cutting her face. I just proved her right, so why should I apologize?" Nestor's gaze grew even more disdainful. "Doris, when did you become like this? Coral's mother might have interfered with someone else's relationship, but Coral isn't to blame for that. How could you treat her this way? Selfish, deceitful, and spiteful. You're such a disappointment." From the hospital room, Coral let out a few coughs. Nestor rushed inside immediately, leaving me standing alone, staring blankly after him. Before Coral arrived, Nestor had always been the perfect adoptive brother. When I cried over my mother, he would gently wipe my tears and hand me a piece of candy. He would get into fights with bullies on my behalf, returning with bruises, but never backing down. He would hold my hand all night when I woke from nightmares. "Don't be afraid. I'll always be here with you." But now, why had he become Coral's brother? I could only watch as he took her shopping, picked her up from school, and did everything with her that he once did with me. I knew Coral didn't have a shred of genuine feeling for him. She was just doing everything she could to hurt me, to take away everyone who mattered to me. My mother, my father, and even Nestor. She had even tried to win over my grandfather, but he never bought into her act, which infuriated her. Later, on a trip, my father and stepmother were in a car accident and tragically passed away. The blow was too much for my grandfather, and he fell gravely ill. On his deathbed, he left a will. 90% of his assets were to go to me. The remaining 10% was to be split between Nestor and Coral. Their pretenses finally crumbled. My father had always been the typical spoiled playboy, drinking and indulging in every vice. My grandfather would shake his head, saying that if the family business were left to him, he'd squander it away in no time. So, he had long ago decided to leave his fortune to me and planned to find me a trustworthy, capable, and honorable childhood husband to groom alongside me. Out of the many children in the orphanage, he hadn't initially considered Nestor. He said Nestor's cold eyes and thin lips betrayed a calculating nature that I wouldn't be able to handle. But young as I was, I insisted on him, clutching his sleeve and refusing to let go. In the end, my grandfather had no choice but to go through with the adoption and bring Nestor home. From that moment on, I was his little shadow, following him around, calling him brother. Besides my grandfather, he was the person I trusted most. Nestor was ambitious, I'd always known and supported that. But he was also the one who worked with Coral to set me up, leading me into a trap. After we got married, his usual coldness vanished, and he treated me like the ideal husband, showing me warmth and care. And I, foolishly, thought he'd changed his heart, and I felt secretly delighted. One night after we were intimate, he held me in his arms, stroking my hair gently. "Doris, I want us to have a child. Why don't you stay home and prepare for pregnancy, and leave the company affairs to me?" Blushing, I nodded. I'd always obeyed Nestor without question. We grew up together as a family, he was my husband, so how could I ever think he'd hurt me? So, I handed over control of the company, leaving all the operations to him and only checking the books from time to time. By the time I realized what was happening, it was already too late. Just as I was dreaming about our future child, poring over name dictionaries, wondering if they would look more like me or Nestor, I discovered that he'd falsified the accounts and secretly started his own company with Coral, swallowing up my grandfather's legacy. Now, the once mighty corporation was a hollow shell. My shares and assets had shrunk to a fraction of their value, while Nestor had transformed into the CEO of a publicly traded company, a rising star in the business world. "Doris, just announce that you're transferring all your shares to Coral, and I'll call off the acquisition, saving you the last shred of your family's dignity." In the boardroom, Nestor looked down on me, his gaze cold and distant. "You're still my wife in name, and you'll be well provided for." Biting my lip, I held back tears, trembling with anger. "Nestor, what do you take me for?" I got nothing in return but an icy glance. We each got what we wanted. Isn't that fair? Yes, it was fair. Coral, once an illegitimate child, had become a legitimate heiress and a celebrated actress. Nestor had his own company and had become a business mogul. Meanwhile, I'd been reduced to a caged bird, Nestor's plaything, to use at his whim. He claimed we both got what we wanted. But all I ever wanted was his love. In the dark of the night, a sports car sped silently down the highway. My soul floated above, watching Nestor and Coral, both harboring their own agendas. I couldn't help but find it amusing. Didn't they ever get tired of pretending? Especially Nestor. He was so close to marrying Coral, he didn't even need to worry about how to divorce me. He should have been popping a bottle of champagne, celebrating his newfound freedom. So why was he so absent-mindedly looking at his phone, refreshing our conversation thread over and over? Dead people don't send messages, you know. My body wasn't found until a month later. The freezer where I was hidden was in a factory warehouse, rarely used. If it weren't for a worker retrieving goods, they probably never would have found me. When they did, my pitiful, frozen form scared them out of their wits, and they fled the cold storage to call the police. In the meantime, my soul seemed bound to Nestor, forced to follow him wherever he went. I watched as he moved in with Coral. When he worked, she would wear a silk nightgown and rub his shoulders. When she was out on assignments, he'd pick her up late at night, protect her at social events. They appeared every bit the loving couple everyone admired. But only I knew how hollow their relationship truly was. Nestor grew more distracted by the day. Even when he was with Coral, he'd often stare blankly at his phone, gazing at our old conversations. It happened again and again until Coral finally exploded. "Doris, it's always Doris. Nestor, do you even care about me? You're with me now, so why are you still so hung up on her?" Nestor frowned, putting his phone away. "Stop being ridiculous. I just want her to step forward and apologize. That would be the quickest way to calm the media storm." During the awards ceremony, Coral publicly sobbed and accused me of bullying her, sparking intense debate among netizens. The fanbase of an actress is no joke, they're fierce. They managed to dig up my personal details, my home address, and even the schools I attended. Some extreme fans even staked out near my rental apartment, but after 3 fruitless days and nights, they left, frustrated. Yet, as more information surfaced, people started to question things. An adoption agreement from the orphanage, charity donation records, and volunteer teaching certificates in remote areas. All these pieces of evidence silently suggested that I wasn't the ruthless, heartless villainous Coral painted me to be. Besides, how could a spoiled heiress who supposedly abuses her power be living in a $70 a month rental? People began to doubt Coral's story. Coral panicked, struggling to maintain her composure. She dug her nails into her palms until they drew blood, finally putting on a look of teary-eyed vulnerability. "It's fine. I don't mind," she said, forcing a tremulous smile. "I'll just have the PR team manage the comments. Nestor, I'm just so scared." Nestor sighed, pulling her into his arms. "Coral, I won't leave you." After calming Coral down to sleep, Nestor hesitated for a long time in his study before finally dialing my number. He was prepared to question me after nearly a month without contact. But all he got in response was a series of busy signals. Pausing, Nestor found another number in his contact list. "I'm sorry, the number you dialed is not in service." He coldly threw his phone down. I watched quietly, almost laughing out loud. Those thugs had been involved in a murder. Though they were under Nestor's powerful protection, they had fled in fear long ago. He had once told me he never wanted to see me again. Now, what's this? Regret? After a dazed moment, Nestor picked up his phone, called his assistant, his hand shaking slightly. "The warehouse in the outskirts, yes, go check if anything's happened there." That's when I sensed something was off. Did Nestor not know that I was already dead? His assistant soon reported back. "There's nothing unusual. Only one warehouse was cordoned off recently, and I heard there was a criminal case a few days ago. It's still under investigation." Nestor's assistant sounded puzzled, clearly not understanding why the boss would send him to check some rundown warehouses in the middle of the night. "A criminal case?" Nestor's face contorted, and his voice rose abruptly. Just as he was about to ask more, the bedroom door suddenly opened, and Coral came out, rubbing her eyes. "Nestor, why aren't you asleep yet?" "It's nothing. Nestor quickly ended the call. Coral clung to him playfully, insisting he come back to bed with her. Distracted, Nestor reluctantly lay down beside her. With Coral's beautiful face nestled in his arm, he still couldn't fall asleep. Coral asked him what was wrong. Nestor steadied himself, cold sweat pooling in his palms before he finally spoke, his voice trembling. There was a criminal case at the warehouse in the outskirts. Do you think, could something have happened to Doris? What? Coral cried out in shock. In the darkness, Nestor sensed Coral's panic wasn't quite natural. He got up and turned on the light, staring hard into Coral's eyes. Do you know something? Coral forced herself to stay calm. How would I know? Nestor, weren't you the one who said to lock her up for a few days as a warning? But, those people know their limits. It was supposed to be just 2 days. How could it end up being a criminal case? Nestor muttered softly to himself. Doris hasn't answered her phone for a long time either. Do you think she got hurt? Could something have happened to her? I smiled silently. Oh, now he remembers to worry about me. Nestor, did you ever think about whether I might get hurt, or worse, when you ordered those people to lock me in the freezer to teach me a lesson? Brother, you really are a hypocrite. Coral, afraid he'd think too deeply, quickly tried to cover up. No way. She hasn't reached out all this time, so she must have run off on her own. She's probably still mad at you and doesn't want to contact you. There's always fighting at that warehouse in the outskirts, maybe some thugs caused the criminal case? That's true. Nestor let out a sigh, almost as if reassuring himself, mumbling quietly. It's been a month already. If something happened, they'd have found out by now. Doris must just be throwing a tantrum with me. Meanwhile, the police were investigating my identity. Since none of the recent missing persons reports matched my description, the police had gone through significant effort to track me down. When the DNA test results finally came in, a young officer gasped. This is Doris, right? The same Doris who was accused online of bullying the actress Coral? How could it be her? The online attacks on me were still raging, while I, in reality, lay dead in a freezing morgue, waiting alone for someone to identify my body. The room full of police officers looked at each other, faces marked by sorrow and pity. The call from the police came while Nestor was accompanying Coral on a reality dating show. Are you Doris's brother? This is the police department. Sorry, you've got the wrong number. Without waiting to hear more, Nestor coldly hung up. The show was at an emotional segment, and Coral leaned into his arms, tearfully recounting her childhood memories. Back then, because Dad preferred me, my sister bullied me a lot. I know she hates me, and I don't blame her. But she slashed my face with a box cutter, pushed me down the stairs, and even tried to find someone to defile me. If it weren't for Nestor, I wouldn't know how I'd have made it through. The celebrity guests on set wiped their eyes, comforting her. The live chat exploded with hateful messages against me. Doris, get out and apologize. When is Doris finally going to die? Bullies should rot in hell. Nestor, at the perfect moment, wiped Coral's tears as they gazed into each other's eyes, on the verge of a kiss. But just as the atmosphere hit its peak, his phone rang urgently once more. Frowning, Nestor turned to answer. Coral, a bit embarrassed, explained to the camera, he has to manage the company, so he's quite busy. But the audience saw it clearly, in that close-up, Nestor's face had turned deathly pale. What did you say? Doris, what happened to her? The director, picking up on the gravity, gestured to turn up the audio. As a result, millions of viewers heard the next line through Nestor's call. This is the police department. Doris is dead. We found her body 3 days ago, at a warehouse on the outskirts. Please come to claim it and assist in the investigation. Until he saw my body, Nestor's behavior remained steady. He instructed the director to cut the live stream, comforted a visibly shaken Coral, telling her to wait at home, and even took the time to arrange for his assistant to manage the company's affairs and ready the PR team to stifle the coming media storm. Only when the police brought him to the morgue did he show any sign of distress. There's no way Doris could be dead. She's just angry with me. You must have the wrong person. She's so timid, it's impossible. If the person in there isn't Doris, I'm suing you all for defamation. The officers said nothing, their faces impassive as they opened the morgue door. My pale corpse lay in the center of the room. Nestor's voice died in his throat. He stumbled forward, and my spirit drifted alongside him. I finally saw my own reflection. The girl who was so thin she seemed like nothing but skin and bones, her body covered with scars both new and old, intersecting in a horrifying pattern. Her skin had turned ashen from the cold, with only her cheeks flushed a strange, unnatural pink. Her long lashes drooped, and the corner of her mouth curled up ever so slightly, as if she were peacefully lost in a sweet dream. It was a typical frozen death appearance. The police officer beside me spoke in a calm tone. After our investigation, we found that Miss Doris was subjected to inhumane abuse before her death. In addition to the visible wounds on her body, there were severe lacerations on her lower half, clearly indicating she had been. The officer paused for a moment, clearly unable to continue. But these wounds weren't fatal. What truly killed her was the -50 degrees Celsius temperature of the cold storage. She was frozen to death. Nestor's large frame shuddered violently. We investigated Doris' phone, the officer continued. Her last contact before death was with you. I'm sorry, Mr. Nestor, but we need to see your phone records. Nestor seemed like a lifeless doll, mechanically unlocking his phone and handing it over. The officer beside him took photos for the record, while Nestor silently stared for a long while, before tremblingly asking, "When, exactly did she die?" The officer opened the messaging app. The last message from the contact Doris was still visible on the screen. "Save me." The officer sighed and pointed at the message. "She sent you this message 5 hours before she passed." Nestor's eyes instantly turned red. So, during the 5 hours after Doris sent that message, full of hope that he would come to save her, what had he been doing? At that time, I was. Nestor struggled to say a few words, but couldn't continue. In my mind, I silently filled in the rest of the sentence. At that time, he had been attending a highly publicized auction. At the same time, Coral was receiving her Best Actress award. In those 5 hours, he had spent $8 million buying Coral a set of high-end custom jewelry. For her, it was a luxury, something he would spare no expense on. For me, he wouldn't even bother to send a little help in my hour of need. He had clearly seen the distress message I sent. But with a mind full of punishing me, he let the thugs he hired abuse and humiliate me without hesitation. Until I froze to death in the cold storage. Realizing this, Nestor slowly slid down against the wall, his chest shaking with broken sobs. Doris. I was wrong. I was wrong. The police quickly tracked down the gang of thugs who had fled. The leader, upon hearing that he was facing a death sentence, was terrified and hastily revealed the mastermind behind it. It was Mr. Nestor. He made me do it. Otherwise, how would I have the guts to go after his sister? In the interrogation room, Nestor's eyes were bloodshot, and the veins on his arms stood out. If not for the police holding him back, he would have lunged forward to tear the thug to pieces. I only told you to scare her, to teach her a lesson. I never told you to harm her, never to humiliate her, never to take her life. Nestor roared in fury, and by the end, there was a choked sob in his voice. She was only 24, so young. When she died in that cold storage, how terrified she must have been. The man no longer had the dignified air of a powerful figure, his expensive suit was wrinkled, and his usually meticulous hair was disheveled. He sat dazedly in the chair, murmuring repeatedly, "I really didn't know how things turned out like this." The police handed him the thug's phone, speaking with cold detachment. "Mr. Nestor, our investigation shows that on the day of Doris's death, you did order someone to kill her." Nestor's gaze fell blankly onto the screen. He saw the message he had sent. "Do it cleanly, leave no evidence. I don't want to see her again." Nestor's pupils constricted sharply. "That's not me, how could I possibly?" Mid-sentence, an idea of something horrifying seemed to dawn on him, and his face turned pale. The thug, who had been slumped over, now raised his eyes and gave a mocking, twisted smile. "Mr. Nestor, your sister put up quite a fight at first. She kicked and screamed, said her brother would skin us alive. But when she saw that message, she didn't even struggle anymore and let us do what we wanted. Tell me, do you think she hated you in that moment?" Nestor staggered back, nearly losing his balance. For a moment, it looked like he might shatter. But it was only a moment. When he raised his head again, he had regained the decisive coldness he was known for, though bloodshot eyes betrayed him. He looked like a vengeful god from the depths of hell. Please contact my lawyer. Nestor's voice was calm and polite. His request followed legal protocol, and the police exchanged glances before stepping out. They missed the final name he whispered through gritted teeth. Coral. The variety show was abruptly cut off. But since it was a live broadcast, countless viewers across the internet had already heard the news of my death. Instantly, social media erupted in chaos. Coral's most extreme fans were still recklessly shouting, "Doris deserved it. Who told her to bully our Coral? This is karma." Some bystanders spoke up, unable to bear it. "Show some respect for the dead, this has gone far enough." Exactly, and Doris had done so many good deeds. Coral's claims of being bullied are just one side of the story with no proof. Coral sat in Nestor's office. Her eyes twitched nervously as she stared at the screen, unable to stop herself from screaming at the increasing flood of criticism online. Where is Nestor? When will he be back? She swept the documents off the desk in a fury, shouting at Nestor's assistant. What do you all do around here? You can't even control this kind of public backlash. I'll make sure Nestor fires every one of you. The assistant smiled politely, though the smile did not reach their eyes. I'm sorry, Miss Coral, but Mr. Nestor ordered the dissolution of your PR team. What did you say? Coral's eyes widened in disbelief, quickly followed by a wave of fear. She knew all too well what she had done over the years. Without Nestor's powerful PR team to silence the critics, she would be exposed by netizens without mercy. She collapsed to the floor, grabbing the assistant's sleeve in desperation. Please, help me. Where is Nestor? I need to see him. The assistant pulled away from her hand coldly. At that moment, the office door was kicked open with a resounding bang. Nestor, usually composed and refined, stormed in like an enraged lion. He seized Coral's slender neck. It was you. You killed Doris. His fingers tightened slowly, cutting off Coral's breath as tears and snot streamed down her face. Nestor. She shook her head in a panic, looking up at him and crying for mercy. Brother, I'm Coral. I don't understand what you're saying. The response was a sharp slap across her face. Coral, I've already found out everything. Nestor closed his eyes, his voice hoarse beyond recognition. You sent that message to Blondie. From the beginning, you never intended for Doris to walk out of there alive. On the 7th day after my death was announced, Coral's true identity was laid bare, and the internet was in an uproar. So Coral was the illegitimate daughter of a mistress. Her mother even forced her way into the family and drove Doris's real mom to death. No wonder Doris hated her. Nestor was actually an orphan whom Doris's family adopted, and they were even engaged to be married from childhood. Yeah, and Coral, who was brought into the family later, dared to interfere with their relationship. Like mother, like daughter. Nestor isn't exactly innocent either. He conspired with Coral to swindle Doris out of most of her wealth to build his own company. Even at this point, many of Coral's fans were still stubbornly defending her. They claimed that, no matter her background, I shouldn't have bullied her. That I was so malicious, I deserved what came to me. Until the official account of Nestor's corporation released a video. In the video, Coral, once radiant, appeared disheveled and defeated. She waved her arms like a madwoman, screaming at the camera. Yes, I hired people to kill Doris, so what? I hated her. Why should she be the pampered heiress while I was just the bastard child? Why did she get to live a life of luxury while I had to skulk in the shadows, constantly trying to please others? I wanted to take everything important away from her, one piece at a time. Nestor's face was dark, but Coral grinned, showing her teeth in a deranged smile. I succeeded. Because Doris was a fool, and so were the people around her. All I did was make a little cut on myself with an art knife, and you locked her in solitary confinement for 3 days. She pushed me down the stairs, and I only twisted my ankle. But I lied and said it was a fracture, and you believed me. The stairs were less than 2 meters high. Ha ha ha. Nestor, you're such an idiot. In the video, Nestor's expression twisted into something monstrous. But Coral kept going, oblivious. Oh, and those thugs? That was my scheme too. I hired actors to pretend to block me in an alley and then pinned it on Doris afterward. My dearest brother, you didn't even investigate and took my word for it. Nestor ground out, enough. Coral cackled hysterically, pointing a slender finger at him. I killed Doris, but you're no better, are you? Nestor, we should go down together, straight to hell. The video cut off as Coral lunged at the camera. The online uproar fell silent. No one knew that after the video ended, Nestor sat on the balcony for the entire night. The cold wind from the rooftop was biting, but he didn't move, like a statue, holding tightly to a photograph. It was a childhood picture of me and Nestor. Nestor gazed at the photo of the young girl, momentarily lost in thought. 6-year-old Doris clung to his arm, her bright smile revealing 2 dimples as she looked up at him, eyes full of joy. His trembling fingers lightly touched my face in the photo, only to draw back as if burned. In a daze, he muttered under his breath. Doris. So, we were once this close. I silently stared at the photograph, feeling a complicated wave of emotions. In truth, Nestor and I had taken many photos together from when we were 6 until I turned 17. Abandoned at the entrance of an orphanage as a child, he never knew his birthday. When I brought him home, my grandfather decided we would share the same birthday. Every year, we would take a picture together and add it to the album. Back then, Nestor was an attentive older brother. I still remember the first time I saw you at the orphanage. You wore a pink dress and stepped down from the nanny's car, surrounded by people. Nestor stared at the young girl in the photo, as if trapped in a memory from long ago. You looked like a little princess. But I was the least favored child in the orphanage. Grandfather held your hand and announced in front of everyone that you would pick one child to be your older brother. All the kids were thrilled. They all scrambled to catch your attention, except for me, standing alone in the corner. As he spoke, Nestor let out a bitter laugh. I was the dirt underfoot, and you were the pure, untouchable moon in the sky. How could I ever hope you would choose me? But Doris. Out of everyone, you picked me. My eyes felt hot, and I silently echoed the thought in my heart. Yes, out of everyone, I chose you. Nestor, what did you promise grandfather back then? Nestor remained lost in thought for 3 full minutes. Finally, he spoke in a hoarse voice. When your soft little hand grabbed mine, my heart almost leapt out of my chest. I swore to grandfather that I would cherish you forever, protect you for a lifetime. Be your brother, be your love. I'm sorry, Doris. I broke my promise. But the dead can't come back to life. Nestor continued to talk, almost as if possessed. After I came to your home, everyone treated me well. I attended the best international schools, and grandfather raised me as if I were the true heir, but I always felt like an outsider. I feared the day you'd fall in love with someone else and discard me like trash. Then Coral appeared. She was just like me, everything we had felt undeserved and could be taken away at any moment. The day she wept in my arms, I lost my mind and believed every word she said. As he finished, Nestor broke down completely. I was so foolish, truly. My Doris, who was always as kind as an angel, could never. I watched his heart-wrenching grief, but my heart remained indifferent. Even now, he tried to blame everything on Coral. Yes, Coral had done terrible things. She cut her own face and accused me, pretended I pushed her down the stairs leading to severe injuries, and falsely claimed I hired thugs to assault her. But as my brother, someone who spent every day with me, did Nestor ever believe me, even a little? He was a cold bystander. And he was also complicit in my death. If not for the support of my family, he would have remained that grimy, insecure child in the orphanage. If not for my trust, he wouldn't have had the chance to steal everything, building his empire on the ruins of my family's company. It was my love and my family's devotion that polished and gilded him, fueling his false confidence and vanity until he became unrecognizable. But he was right about one thing. He and Coral were alike. No matter how they masked themselves in kindness, at their core, they were selfish and vicious. I curled my lips, my gaze as cold as ever as I looked at him. I was at fault for trusting the wrong person. From that day on, Coral's fans left her in droves, and her reputation plunged to rock bottom. Coral went completely mad. Unable to be incarcerated, she was sent by Nestor to a private psychiatric hospital. The car had barely pulled up to the gates when the shrill, chaotic screams inside could already be heard, as terrifying as a scene from hell. Coral struggled wildly, trying to flee, but was held down without mercy. "Coral, stay here and enjoy the rest of your life," Nestor whispered, enunciating each word by her ear. Coral shuddered in terror and fainted. Only then did Nestor, with disdain, release her hand and order his people. "Take her inside." The car drove off once more. This time, its destination was the funeral home. My body lay amidst a bed of crimson rose petals, like a sleeping beauty. He stood silently by the coffin, then bent down to kiss my cold fingertips. Suddenly, there was a commotion at the door. A group of uniformed police officers surged in. Nestor ignored them, gazing longingly at my face, pressing a final kiss to my forehead. Only after that did he rise, unhurried. In a perfectly tailored suit, looking as striking as ever, he could have been at an elite gala. He let the officers handcuff him without resistance. "Nestor, you're under arrest for murder. Please come with us." I watched it all coldly, my heart utterly unmoved. Until just before he stepped into the police car. Nestor turned abruptly, his gaze heavy, fixed on me as if he could truly see me. Did he see me? A chill ran down my spine. Nestor stared at me, lips curving into a gentle smile as he mouthed soundlessly. "Doris, wait for me. When I've atoned for everything, I'll come find you." Nestor was sentenced to 13 years in prison. Through the long years, I'd let go of my love and hatred, but I remained unwilling to reincarnate, drifting as a wisp of wind through the world. 13 years later. Nestor's name resurfaced in the news. The once renowned young CEO was found dead in his home on the day after his release. He had taken his own life. I wandered the streets, hearing the whispers around me, feeling a strange sense of disquiet. Until a familiar voice spoke behind me. "Doris. I've come to atone for my sins myself." The end.